In this video help, we're going to be using the home renovation database, but we're going to explain the usage of this calendar. The calendar itself is designed for multi-user, but in the iOS version, it's a single user only version, and some of the features and the way it's used are changed in this version, and I'll explain that. There is a users link up here at the top that will open a user screen. There's an administrator account. You could add additional accounts by clicking on the plus button, but what that does is it'll change the functionality of the way the calendar works in iOS, where you have to log in to the application in order to gain access. So you do not want to do that on your single user version on the iPad or iPhone from the iTunes calendar version. There's also a multi-language area over here where you can edit this. This is for advanced users and is not supposed to be edited by yourself in the iOS version. If we have a custom version like the PC and the Mac version, this would come into play where we'd actually be able to edit some of the information on the calendar. Let's return to the calendar and I'll explain how this is used. The calendar itself was designed so that you can add individual date and tasks on any individual date. So if you're looking at the date up here, you can move forward or backward, or you can click in the center to get the current date based on the computer or iPad calendar. The show completed in this particular case is an indication where the record that you're currently working in is completed, and it's showing the completed things, and I'll explain what that is. You'll see on the individual record that when you created one, there's a completed here. If you put a check in the checkbox, it's going to make this item show as completed. If you take the check mark out, it's not going to do that. So you have to have this checked in this iOS version to make sure that any record that you completed and a task that you completed for that day is shown as completed. Now, if you do not complete them and you pass the day at the 24-hour point where it changes the date to the next date, what's going to happen is that this application will show an expired appointment. In this particular case, appointments are things that are tasks that need to be done, or they can be appointments from the standpoint of the words that's used in the daily appointments. What you're doing is you're creating it, and at the end of it, at the date, you should be completing all the tasks that are being done in this area. If you do not complete them, each task that is not completed will drop over here and show that it needs to be reassigned a new date and time so that you can complete them, or you can cancel them by saying completed, or you can actually edit the record using the red or well, actually kind of orange check boxes here, and you could remove that particular task that's being done from the records. Now, just so you know, you should not be removing tasks that are completed that are a part of your actual work function and tasks that you're completing and scheduling. That will ruin the actual purpose of this application, which is to track all the information from the standpoint of the date and time of each task, which is the title name here that shows what it actually is. If you take each one of these out, it's going to make it very difficult for you to do information and add information at a later date. Let's go ahead and cover the individual pieces in here. If you're going to add a new indicator in here as far as a new record, you click on the plus arrow next to daily appointment. Right now there's currently one in this date for this date, which is March 29th. And if you want to actually review the record that is already added in there, you click this arrow to view this record. You can also click on the title, and the title will also open up the edit record to edit the information that you see in this area. Now in this case, there's a number that will sequence to the next individual date record within the appointments for each new record that you add to the database. There's a priority that we're going to be editing, which is normal, routine, and action required. Assigned by will always be admin in the case of using the iOS version based on the actual user that is shown at the top. There is a date and a time field within the editing screen, and we're going to be showing that, where we show the date of the actual task that's being worked and the time that it starts, the actual date that is going to be completed, and the time that is going to be completed. You can do an advanced date. For example, if this is the 29th, I can actually put the 30th or any other date in here that's in advance of the original date here and a time. And what it'll do is it'll show each one of those individual dates and tasks for this particular task. If it's a time-based over more than one day, it'll show on each calendar date that you're reviewing appear on the screen. The next thing you can do is you can actually search for a particular phrase or word that's in any of the fields that are in the database. So if I wanted to put in there updates and tests, update test, it would then search for that and show that record in whatever date record it's in. That could mean that there could be multiple records where you have that same information, but it's not likely because the title should be somewhat unique. And I'll explain that when we actually go in and edit an actual record. For this purposes, we're just doing a test to show you how these are used in the record keeping. The next thing we're going to be looking at is a drop-down list that shows the status of each individual task. If you tap in that field, you're going to see that there's a number of different kinds of tasks that can be assigned, and what the purpose of those tasks are shown in there in the actual narrative that is in here. Selecting subs, sending documents, site inspections, so forth. Now the information you put in here will also be shown in the records in the back end of the application, because the same thing is available as far as doing status there, and I'll explain how that works. Okay, let's click out of here, go back into the day. What you're going to see for each one of these items on a date time period, you can set the top, let's show it, top 5 priority items as they're being done and needed to be done. So you have 5 of the top priorities. So what you would go through the date, if you had a number of items in here, you would assign either number 1 at the top priority down to a number 5 for that date to get those done in order as the top 5 items that need to be started and finished on the same date. If you don't have a date where this is going to be completed on the same day as what's listed here, it would not be one of the priority items that you would show. The next thing we want to do is go ahead and show you that the calendar down here at the bottom of the screen has a couple of capabilities that it uses. You can go from month to month or day to day in this calendar. As far as month to month, you can see that I'm in March 2016, and any item, and this is kind of hard to see right now because I'm taking this and using it in the simulator on the Macintosh, and what it does, and I'm using it for an iPad too, and it kind of truncates and causes some issues. This should have a nice strong black line underneath of it because there is actually a scheduled item here, and if you'll see here, there's also one on the 30th. If I tapped in that, it would show me the one for the 30th. Now we're looking at a record that has different information in it. This is dated for the 30th at different times. It has a different icon because it's a property and evaluation. There are drop downs within the evaluation area where we're going to be dating and editing this information, and you'll see you can pick that different icon and it'll show up on this main screen. At this point, let's go ahead and go to the actual record and see what we're editing and how the information is set up within the editing screen. Let's go ahead and click on it. When it comes into this screen, the information that is in the title is the first thing you're going to be adding if this was a new record. If it's a new record, all the fields that you see in here would be blank. So what we're going to be showing you here is that the first thing you do is you would add in something as far as what is going on in the task. The next thing would be the property, and you could, in addition to that, put a person's name if it's a person's property if you wanted to. But normally what you would do is you would enter the task, a colon, and then what the address is. This will be so that when it shows on the calendar, as you can see up here, it's easy to understand what this individual appointment task is for. Now we just said that there was an icon that you could set the type. Let's go ahead and look at this. There are all these different things that you can do as far as setting the screen and the icon as far as what is going on. If I wanted to change this to an offer, you would see that it makes a different icon in here and it puts the word offer. If it's an auction where you're selling the property, you would see an auction. And an action item is an action item like we saw in the first record that we were working at. Construction is a little home. So you can see that there are, let's put it back to what it actually was, which was a evaluation. So let's go in there, property, activity, and there it is, property evaluation. Now down here, if you had the multi-user version of it, each person that could log in would be listed in this white area. And for each person's calendar, when they have their own login, you would put a checkbox if you wanted to show that information within that individual person's record for their own calendar. they would not have the ability, unless they're an administrator, to see all the different calendars. They would only be able to see their own, and it would be for their individual usage as far as their calendar, things that are assigned for them to do. This is the priority that we were looking at. There is a different priority in this particular case for each one of these items here that we're looking at, and you can set those by clicking through each one and setting that priority. Over here, when you're doing the particular thing for setting the date, you can see that when you're setting the priority, it doesn't make any difference, but the date would be the thing it's telling you need to put in here, and you would put the start date, click away to go ahead and go to the next area, then tap in again and put the finish due date. And like I said, you could do a spread of dates if you want to do them in there. You do the starting time and the ending time. Now, let's take a for instance. What if this were a property evaluation where you're going to do the property evaluation and it's going to be on a date, but it's going to be finished the next day, and you're having inspectors come out, maybe from the city or the county, and you want to do it over a 2-day or 3-day period. What you would do is obviously put the starting date and the finishing date, and then you can go ahead and adjust all this information to match what you're actually working on and doing. In this particular case down here, we did 1 day, and this was assigned by the admin. It'll stay assigned by the admin because this is the single user version. If this were completed, as we stated before, if you completed this activity, you go ahead and check box this, and what it do, it would put a line through the calendar. You can either do it on the calendar or in this screen. Deleting a record, the only time you ever use this delete in the record here is if you started a new task or appointment and that information was incorrectly added on maybe the wrong day or date, and that way it could be corrected here if that were day and date. But say, for example, it was not accurate and you wanted to delete it, you could delete it from here if you need to. This is not intended for you to delete all the data that you had already added. It's only for if there's an issue where you want to change that information. Okay, let's take a look at the actual selection of the property that you're looking for. This yellow field down here where it says customer ID, you would go ahead and click in there, and what it would do, and there's only 4 particular properties that are in there right now, and they're assigned a sequential number in order of the way they were added, and in this particular case 1 through the number of different people that are clients, or it could be yourself as a client if you needed to have it that way. And all you would do is go ahead and tap on the record you want to change it to, and notice that when I do that, it changes all the information in this area here, and it's assigning it now to a different record in the back end of the application for the data that you're going to view. You'll see that it emptied out the portal record. Let's go back, and I'll put it back to number 2, and you'll see that when I do that, it brings back the information for the number 2 record. What you're doing here is if you're selecting a person that has already been added to your application on the back end of the application, it gives you access to that particular record where you're looking at the data within the calendar for that particular person. This gives you the ability to understand what you're evaluating and each task that you're doing and what is relevant as far as the information that you're actually adding to this part of the screen. Now, I'm not going to go into this in depth where the actual portal is and what information is being put in there. You can edit some of the fields in a popover. For example, if you tapped into them, you could edit or add information to it. But in this particular case for this screen, what we're going to do is just show you the portal, and then when we get back into the application in the back end, we're going to go ahead and edit these and add records. Making this really important to understand at this point. When you're selecting a client, if they're not already part of the back end of the application, you're going to need to go to the customer screen in the back end of the application and add that client so that you have that information so that it's selectable in the front end on the calendar itself. You do have access to this particular field, which is looking at the individual items that are amenities within the evaluation of the property. We're doing a property eval here, and this will give you a listing of all the items that you're evaluating that will be cost items that you need to be aware of when you're doing the flip in the home, whether required or say they're going to be replaced by the you or by the customer. The buyer themselves is going to have to pay for the item that is going into the thing as far as the home. If you're doing a home where you're renovating it for somebody and you're replacing items, this gives you the ability to understand what renovation items that the contractor is responsible for replacing and which ones are responsible for a seller replacing, or is the buyer going to pay for the item. So we'll go back into this in depth later on. These individual popovers here are used when you're working within the front or at the back end of the applications. They're repeated on the customer screen. For example, this is the listing map property for the actual location of the property within the main records in the back end of the application. And what it's doing is it's opening up Google Maps. In this particular case, the property has to have an ID as far as the property. Let's click off here and show you. It has to have a location and the information for the state and so forth in order to provide the map. Let's go ahead and do the site inspection. Each one of these will be covered in the back end of the application, but they can be used and edited from this screen if you need to by resetting the information that's going to be in here that may change in the process of doing something in the field. If you edit the record here, whatever you edit here will be updated in the back end of the application. And as I said before, you have to have already assigned a customer so that you can use this information and manage it when you're working in the back end of the application. The next thing is the inspection photos. This is a scrolling portal. And what happens, this allows you to move through the portal and add individual inspection images and items that you're describing as far as what needs to be done or what picture you're evaluating. And this is a description. You may be looking at a room or in say like a bathroom or the kitchen. And for the actual inspection photos, you're taking and putting a comment about that photo. Maybe there's a piece of damage on the wall, or there's a door that is sprung and it's not fitting correctly. This is where you would say the picture of the door where there's a sprung portion and what has to be done, and for that particular image. Let's go to the next one, which is the offer track. The offer track is based on the numeric values that you're putting in, and we'll go into this in depth in the back end of the application, where you're either taking offers to sell a property when you're flipping it, or in this particular case, it can be used as far as checking the property market value through cap rates and so forth, and adding the information so that you can budget your renovation to fit the cap if you're going to be flipping the property. The next one is correspondence. Any kind of correspondence that you're doing either with the city, county, or the individual that you're doing the home for is trapped in this record. And this is also, these are all portals where they have additional records that you can add so that you can have all your data included in this tracking area. Then there's document tracking. If there's any documents that you have to provide to the city, the county, the state, or to the owner or whoever you're flipping the home for or renovating it, this is where you would document that information as far as what is in the record that you're sending the documents to whom and what you expect to have as a result, and the document filed location if it's for the city or county, and you want to have the record filing information at that point. Subcontractor select. This is where you're actually selecting your subcontractors. And in this particular record, what you're doing is you're evaluating the different subcontractors, and you're defining what they who they are and what the choice of different contractors that you may have, subcontractors, and you're going to be picking from this list to show what the responsibilities of the subcontractors are and the requirements, the comments, and the evaluation of what they're going to be doing when you select them. Now you can have more subcontractors than you actually use in this particular dwelling that you're working on, and maybe you don't assign any work to them because maybe their bid to do the work is too high. But if you're showing what the contractor is supposed to be doing and the materials that they should be providing in this area and the sum of the cost of all the materials, that would give you whatever they're bidding against as far as the materials. And this gives you an idea of what the cost is going to be to either yourself or the owner or seller of the property that you're renovating the property for. And we'll cover that more in detail. Sub schedule. This is the actual subs that are being scheduled and their task budget, their task final budget that is either above, below, or on target. In this particular case, it shows one that is above the target. They went over, and depending upon how you contacted and contracted the labor and the tasks that they're doing, they may be out that money difference if they didn't stay to their actual contracted amount. Scheduled task, is it completed? Yes or no? Was all the work inspected, and what did you find? and then the scheduled next event that this person may be coming back to do an additional thing, and the scheduled dates for whatever work they're doing, and the main task that they're expected to do is a summary task at the top. Each one of these has its own little identifier to the actual property that's being worked on. You'll notice here that the customer schedule is for 2, and this is 2. And all the records in here that you're looking at for the particular tasks that are being done in this portal by the subcontractors will be listed as far as what the schedule is and what they're doing. This gives you the ability to manage all the schedules and everything. Then if you wanted to add a floor plan, you can actually tap into the record and add one of a graphic that you have. And this could be anything from the photo library on your iPad or iPhone to add a graphic that is the actual floor plan or floor plans. In this particular case, if I'm working in here and I have a bunch of floor plans that I need to work with, this is again a portal so I can have all the plans in this area that I want to use. And by the way, I can also add a graphic. This could be a before and after where you actually put in the individual graphic for what they're doing, and you show a before, which might look like an old ugly tub that's in there, and then when they're completed for that task, what did they complete and what they do? And this is again the same situation where you go in and do the work, and when it's completed, you take a picture of the completed work. This covers the basic portion of the calendar and what you can do from the front end of the application where you have the calendar, and it gives you the ability really rapidly to move through and see information and edit and add tasks that are time-based within the calendar itself. If you have questions and you need assistance, I'll probably say this many times through the videos, contact us at the developer's website and start a chat or send an email and ask for assistance if you have questions about how to use this application. Now I have 1 or 2 things I want to cover. You have a support which will take you to the developer's website up here, and then the video help button here, when you click on it, will take you to the videos that you're viewing, like this one right now. Down at the bottom, these are things that will not be used in this version. These are for the multi-user version where you have logins and preferences and a profile, and these are not used on the iOS version, so you don't have to address these here. Thank you for taking this video.